NBR Draft Pod. We're doing it, as we like to say, and it's a special edition from the home studio. The boys are at camp. They're doing their thing, so the usual disclosure I do. This isn't the Broncos pod. Have no fear. Your regular programmed Broncos content still coming to you like it always does. The guys are on a 4-day week this week after 2 6-day weeks, so they're coming to you tomorrow, pregame, watch along, postgame, as the Broncos take on the Dirty Birds in Hotlanta. But I have friend of the show, reoccurring guest, Fran Duffy, on special preseason preview. Fran, how are you doing? Very excited about this.
Dre, I'm doing great. You know, football is in the air. We're getting close to week 0 in college football. Obviously, a lot of preseason action here in the coming days. So it's we're just about here.
Yeah, I mean, for you, the beauty of being a draft analyst is it never ends. You're just watching football year round, and you get to grind through tape in the summer. How's the summer tape grind treating you?
It's been fun. You know, it's been eventful because while I'm trying to get through as much tape as possible on a lot of these guys, there are also scouting reports that I revisited that I did in the fall, because as we know, a lot of these guys that were talented underclassmen that we thought might enter the 2026 draft ended up going back to school. So I'm like, all right, let me blow some of the dust off of the Samari Washington scouting report from last October, and things like that. But the other aspect that we'll get into later has been the creation of the new draft guide, the new look draft guide. So that has taken up a lot of the time as well that I've been spending. So while it hasn't been all studying tape, it's been a very productive summer. So I'm excited to let this thing loose.
I love that. I've been able to poke behind the scenes on the new draft guide, and let me tell you guys, this is going to be a great one. You're going to love it. And yeah, Fran, we have you on like 3 times a year, but we mention Fran at least 3 times an episode. Your rankings, your analysis comes up one way or another. You are ubiquitous with this draft pod. You are kind of our guide, from above. You guide us with your draft guide. You guide us with everything. So I'm glad to talk through it all here. And let's get into this 2027 class, man. How good do you think this class can really be?
It's an awesome class. Now, look, I want to just lay the one thing out, that because I alluded to it earlier, that we saw a lot of underclassmen go back last offseason, go back to school. So, that could happen again. There are a lot of players that we'll talk about that have future eligibility. But that said, as we're sitting here on August 13th, when I look at my board, look at the guys that I've evaluated, there are a lot of blue chip talented players at key positions. It's not just quarterback, although quarterback is very exciting, but you look at pass rushers, and you look at corners, and you look at wide receiver, and you look across the board, and they're just really, really talented players that everyone can universally get excited about. So yeah, this has the makings of a very, very strong draft in 2027.
Yeah, it was fun. The last episode, it was the rare summer where we took July off the pod. So we came back last week, did our rivaling top 10s with Jake and I, and was like half the top 10 were guys we've only seen freshman and sophomore years from, and it's like, that's all I need. These guys are ready to go. And then the other half is guys who probably came back to school, the Amari Washingtons of the world, and it's like, if they declared, maybe Trevor Gooseby would have been offensive tackle 1 in last year's class, or Amari Washington could have been, interior D-line 1 in this past draft. So it's a nice mix. But I like what you said. It's a premium position heavy draft. The star wide receivers, the quarterbacks, the edge rush class is really promising. I love this interior D-line class. I think you have like 3 of these defensive tackles in your top 10? Maybe more.
Yes. Well, you look at certainly Amari Washington. As we're sitting here right now, let me just pull the board up because it's very easy for me to be able to do that. Let's go with Will Eccles from Ole Miss is in there right now. But I know I've still got a few guys that I know are going to end up in there that are going to probably bump him down a bit. But either way, like Will Eccles is a guy that I think has legitimate pro potential. But then there are a few others that I know are going to end up in that list as well. I mean, you look at like Ahmad Moten. I know you've done a deep dive on Moten. I have not finished the report on him yet, so he's a player that could ascend to that level. It's an intriguing group in the trenches for sure.
Yeah, it just promises to be a really fun class. Not that it's a premium position, but I also think running back has some intriguing pieces. I like how high you have Raleek Brown and LJ Martin, guys we were getting excited about in November last year.
Right.
Stayed in school. And looking at your rankings, I was really excited to see a couple tight ends in your top 20, which maybe, it's early. The season hasn't started, but if we're looking ahead, for the Broncos, an area they could get stronger in might be that tight end class. We've got another Oregon guy, and then tell me about the kid at LSU.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with the guy who I think is probably the more complete of the two, and that is Jamari Johnson from Oregon. And this guy's a Louisville transfer. He is a big-bodied kid. He's bigger than Kenyon Sadiq was last year. I think Sadiq has a little bit more juice as an athlete, a little bit more movement potential, some more of that, the quote-unquote Joker skill set that we talk about all the time with Sean Payton. But this guy's 6'5". He's near 260 pounds. I mentioned the ability to line up in line. He competes just like Sadiq. He competes as a blocker. He runs his feet. There's some really good flashes there off the film. Was late to the tight end position, didn't really move to tight end until late in his high school career, and goes to Louisville, gets hurt, so like not a ton of time on task, but last year became a starter alongside Sadiq in that offense, and the flashes were really, really good. He kind of reminds me a bit of David Njoku when Njoku was coming out of the University of Miami, where he was young. You saw what he could be down the line, and I think Jamari Johnson has a similar type of profile. Trey'Dez Green, he's a tricky one because I mean when you just look at the body, I mean he's 6'5", under 240, so he's tall, he's long, he's lean. Former college, played basketball when he first got to LSU. Like there's a legit basketball player. And he looks like that when you watch him. A unique athlete. He can line up in the slot. He can get down the seam. He can go up and attack the ball in high point. A legitimate red zone weapon. When you look at his usage in that LSU offense, I do think Lane Kiffin is going to feature him pretty well in this offense as well this year. So I'm excited about his connection with quarterback Sam Levitt. He's a willing blocker. What's tricky is that he's not a great blocker at this point. He does compete. So I think I look at him a little bit differently than I looked at, say, like Eli Stowers back, in the last cycle. Yes. Or I do think Green can give you a little bit there. I want to see him up close and get a better sense of like the growth potential and like how much more weight this guy can pack on. But for a coach like Sean Payton, Trey'Dez Green would intrigue me because I do think that marriage would work well. He would be someone that I think would get the most out of Trey'Dez Green.
Yeah, that'd be an intriguing fit. How Lane uses him with the Tigers will be really interesting. But back to Johnson, I mean, this is a guy who, by the playoffs, it felt like he was getting more targets than Kenyon Sadiq. And he moves like a guy that size shouldn't be able to move. It's crazy.
Yeah, no question. He definitely moves really well for a guy who's 260. And again, just when you have that combo skill set, especially with what we're seeing right now in today's game. And, we'll see how that evolves in 2026 this fall. But I think when you look at what teams are looking for, you're looking for guys that can compete at high level in both phases. And I think Jamari Johnson has that makeup where, this is a guy that absolutely can impact the game as both a blocker and as a pass catcher.
You have him 11th on your board, not to give up too much, but that feels like coming into a season, I don't imagine you've had too many tight ends flirting with the top 11.
Yeah, Sadiq was somewhere in that range last year, if I had to remember. Obviously like Kyle Pitts was somewhere in that range. Yeah. Bowers was in that range, but I don't know that Jamari Johnson will end up with that lofty of a grade. But again, like when you look at how teams are valuing that prototype, He's a good player. This is a guy that I think, he's got the makings of NFL starter all day.
No doubt. And we should remind our listeners and viewers that no one was higher on Justin Jolie than you. So this is no shade to the tight ends the Broncos already have on the roster. But
how's that go? How's that going? So I honestly have not seen a lot of Justin Jolie. Like, what are we thinking right now at this point in training camp?
I think the preseason will tell us a lot. So far, there's been little snippets, but nothing nothing monumental. You know, I think in general the rookies, no one's necessarily popped too much. I think the most buzz we've gotten over the younger guys, first, second year guys, I think is coming from Q Robinson.
Got it.
The Q Robinson hype train's starting to really pick up.
That was the guy last year that honestly, of the players they drafted last year and where they drafted him, that was the one I was most excited about. I wasn't as crazy about some of the other picks, but Q Robinson was one that caught my eye.
Yeah, Q's just seems like that athleticism's shining, and he's becoming pretty hard to block out on the edge there. Now, the problem in Denver is you've got so much depth that, just finding the field's going to be interesting. But Jolie's one of the guys I'll have a close eye on for this preseason game in Atlanta. Speaking of the tight ends, speaking of Oregon, is that the most stacked team as far as prospects coming into this season?
Yeah, I'll take a look and see which teams are showing up most often. I've got 300 plus players on the board, just kind of in the database right now. I would say Oregon is one that stands out. I think they might have I have the most graded players from Oregon right now. Yeah. But Texas has a bunch.
Dude. When we were doing the top 10s, Texas really stood out.
Yeah, Texas has a bunch. Notre Dame's got a bunch.
Yeah.
Ohio State obviously will have a bunch. Georgia, your typical ones. But I think those would be the first three that come to mind would be Notre Dame, Oregon, and Texas.
It's a good group. Would that be your prediction for your Final Four?
Ooh,
I know we're all over the place.
I would say without putting any thought into it. I think it does feel right if I say Texas, Oregon, Notre Dame, Ohio State. Like that feels right to me.
That feels really right.
That feels right.
Yeah, no doubt. It's funny. Some seasons feel like transition seasons where it's like, all the blue chip programs have new starting quarterbacks. We'll see how it works out. And then there are some seasons where it feels like it's going to be epic. And all the top teams are returning a quarterback, like they're stacked. And this feels like one of those seasons where we're really going to get some fireworks all the college football season. Yeah.
Yeah, last year's college season, and I know that there's a lot of talk about the state of college football right now, and there is a lot to clean up.
Yeah,
the college season last year was such a blast, and I'm really excited for this year's as well for that reason. It's extremely entertaining product.
I mean, is that something that, in a sense, the NIL era, say what you will, but it is making for a better product on field because these guys who are kind of forced into declaring to get that bag earlier are allowed to just earn in college and stay in school and develop properly, and it's stacking teams the way it should?
I think that's part of it. I also, and it's funny because there are a lot of people in especially the college football lifers that feel that go against this thought. Yeah. But I think the expanded playoff creates more entertainment, creates more stakes for more teams. So there are more games that mean more where, yes, I understand that the loser of Alabama LSU in late October in the year 2019, all right, that means you're done. You're not making it. Whereas now that doesn't have that same impact, but conversely, that means that there is more impact for more games. We're not just poaching all of our eggs into 3 games over the course of the college football season. To me, there are more games with more stakes, and to me that's entertaining.
Well, and the 14 playoff had created this hierarchy where it was Ohio State, Clemson.
Yep.
I'm forgetting the other 4, but it was a short list of it's always these 4 teams. Bama, Notre Dame were among those.
Yes.
Those 5.
To your point, I don't want to cut you off, right? Yeah. But you're exactly right about this because I remember, I want to say, right, and I forget the exact year, but I want to say it was 2019, 2018. So the 4-team playoff had been existing, it's existed for 4 or 5 years at this point, right? So we're a few years in, and all you had to do, it was pre-NIL and transfer portal. So it was that window right there. You go to recruiting rankings that year, and it was the top 9 teams were the 9 teams that had ever made the 4-team playoff. And it was like, yeah, you have created a finite number, a shallow number of like haves and have-nots in college football. And by expanding the playoff and creating access to more programs to that playoff, that opens it up a little bit. And then obviously the portal opens it up a bit, and NIL opens it up a bit. And so now like that to me, like the parity is definitely improved.
Yeah.
Where they have to, and this is where, you know, the awkwardness is right now, is they like, people don't like the playoff and like using using like a committee to pick a playoff and things of that nature. Yeah. There are more teams in the Big Ten than there are in the entire NFC.
It's insane.
Right. To say like, all right, well, you know, we can't have like, you know, more teams from the, you know, this conference or that conference. Like, it is very hard to whittle down. Imagine saying like, all right, well, we the NFC, there are more, you know, we have to just pick a couple of teams here to make the playoff from the entire NFC. There are just so many of these teams that you have to pick from. So, yeah, like I want to see an expanded playoff. And honestly, like I think schedule parity is going to be a big thing moving forward. Like trying to create like schedule equity there, I think that's big. Equality, I should say.
The regionality, losing some of that.
They have to fix some of these things. Yes.
How late the season goes has been a pain. Like
that's what I mean. Like a lot of that stuff they got to sort through. But I think to me, it's on the right track.
It's mattering less. There's some things we got to figure out, but there's also some really good things. I mean,
yes.
And I look at college football a lot of times, and it's like, man, these problems we're seeing in the NFL, why are they not happening in college football? Like, you should honestly look at the other side of the sport and be like, why are they getting it right? You know,
right?
And we could do the next
whole show on this. Yeah, right. Yes.
100%. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll be right back to talk more college football and draft with Fran. Shady Rays, man. The glasses for all seasons, any season, Shady Rays season in our beautiful state, whether the snow is out or it's a hot summer day like it's been lately, Shady Rays always has you covered with stylish, real, durable sunglasses for you with great lenses on them. And then it's always time for Shady Rays, because it doesn't matter if you've lost them, if you've broken them, Shady Rays has you covered. They are always taking care of our people with their incredible policy where they'll reimburse you, no questions asked. They're also sponsoring our Rooftop Fridays. That tells you what real homies they are. We've been partnering with them for so long. I have like 5 pairs already. I've gotten my wife pairs. You can't go wrong with Shady Rays. They're always the best. Join us at Coors Field on August 21st is the next Rooftop Fridays. RSVP at ddmvr.com/events. And go to shadyrays.com and use our code DMVR50 for 50% off 2 pairs of polarized sunglasses. Best deal in the business. And also, I want to give a shout out to our friends at Bolo Sports. Bolo, man, oof, they do such great stuff. We were just out there not too long ago for field day. They do adult social sports leagues, pickup games, community events. They've got it all. They'll be in the bar doing trivia or other activities, and you can just tell people are having a blast. It's a great way to meet people. It's a great way to get together with friends and get active, do some competition. It's like tons of fun, just the right amount of like competitive, but it's also fun and everyone's cool. And it's like great way to just meet people around town and stuff. Leagues and events take place all around Denver, including Sluins Lake, Rhino, Lodo, Highlands, City Park, South Broadway. So players can sign up as a free agent or gather a team, and all skill levels are welcome. You can use our code Broncos15 for $15 off your first Bolo Denver league at bolosports.com/Denver. Highly recommend get in on them. They're an amazing partner. Support them. All right, we're back. Back with Fran, draft pod in full effect. Fran, let's get into some of these rankings you've got so far. Who's your QB1? How do you see this quarterback class?
Yeah, I think if we were playing a game tomorrow, I don't think that this guy would be the best quarterback, right? But it is hard if I'm projecting forward and how I view this player in 3 years, 5 years. I got to have Arch Manning number 1. I still have faith in the overall talent. I I think the arrow was pointing up based off the second half of last year. I thought he got better as the season went on. I thought he fought through a ton of adversity, and was able to come through on the other side. I really love everything I've seen from Dante Moore. There are a couple other people that I'm really excited about at the position. But to me, like Arch Manning is the guy that I find it hard because, again, understanding yes, the film is inconsistent from last year. There were some low moments. And there's some things where I'm like, if this continues and then he declares for the draft, maybe that grade, I move off that a little bit. But right now, I'm still going to have Arch there, number one. I'm still optimistic here as we sit in the middle of August.
Would you tell me about this Miami QB, the Duke transfer? I'm surprised to see how high you are and some of the other people I respect in the industry. He was a guy who was under my radar, and I'm feeling a bit behind on my study there.
Yeah, Darian Mensah, who began his career at Tulane, if memory serves. I think Tulane was his only FBS offer, and so he goes to Tulane. He was a California kid, and was there as a backup his first year. Enters a sort of red shirts, goes into a quarterback competition, was third man on the totem pole going into the competition, and wins the competition at Tulane, leads them to the AAC title there as a redshirt freshman. So he has a ton of success. Transfers, goes to Duke last year, leads Duke to the ACC title game last year, wins the championship last year at Duke, goes into the portal again and goes to Miami. So it's his third school in 3 years. He's had success wherever he's been. Going back and watching the film from last year, he's not going to blow you away from a physical tools standpoint, right? I think the arm is solid, the athleticism is solid, the size is okay. He's one of those guys where I see why he only had one FBS offer coming out of high school, right? But this guy operates the offense at such a high clip. The third down stuff was really good. The red zone was really good. The situational football, 2-minute drill, all that stuff was just nails. I just got going through and I'm watching the third down reel from the entire season, watching him in the red zone, watching all these different situations kind of broken up, really stood out to me. The accuracy and decision-making across the board really stood out to me. We're to the point where I'm I feel like this kid has the ability to be a starter. Is he a top 10 type of quarterback down the road? Probably not, but can he be the 12th best and 15th best and 17th best quarterback? Absolutely. And we've had that conversation. That's the reason why I had going into his senior season, I had Bo Nix and a similar kind of grade. Honestly, it's kind of similar to my view on Darian Mensah to how I viewed Bo Nix going into his final season at Oregon. And so, I do like what I've seen from the redshirt junior quarterback there now with the University of Miami.
Yeah, and then you have Trinidad in the mix here. Yep. Sam Levitt, of course, Sorsby, Sorsby, and then Lenora Sellers. I mean, there's a lot of raw talent in this QB class, and it's honestly weird for me, man, because it's the AFC West. I think it's going to be 2 years before we see another quarterback drafted highly in this division, at least, right? I mean, it could be a decade if Mendoza works out.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, when talking about the quarterbacks in general, because we had this conversation a year ago, the quarterback class looks stacked. It's the same thing this year where I'm there are a lot of options, but Arch Manning, he's got 2 years of eligibility left. Dante Moore, he's got 2 years of eligibility. Darian Mensah, he's got 2 years of eligibility. You look at Sam Levitt, he's got 2 more years. You look at Trinidad Chambliss, he's done. This is his last season. Yeah. Brendan Sorsby, we know he's coming out in this class. Lenora Sellers, he's got 2 more years. So, and you go right down the line. There's love for Drew Mestamaker from Oklahoma State. He's a redshirt sophomore who just played quarterback. It was his first year starting since middle school last year. Did not start at quarterback in high school, and elevated to the starter last year at North Texas and followed his coach to Oklahoma State. And you just go to CJ Carr, Julian Sand, all these guys that we're talking about, and they're all talented. Yep, they're all underclassmen. So and I've made this point with you in the past. I believe, with an exception here or there, all these guys should soak up every single ounce of eligibility they possibly can. Go the Bo Nix route and take every single snap you can at college before you declare. Do I fault guys for making the call? No. But when Dante Moore decided, hey, you know what, instead of being the number 2 pick in the draft or the number 3 pick in the draft, I want to go back and be the best version of myself. I want to be the best Dante Moore I possibly can be before I hit the league. I don't blame guys for that because, honestly, patience runs thin in the NFL. You have such a short leash in today's league where even if you are developmental, and everyone knows it, Anthony Richardson, everyone knew that Anthony Richardson was developmental coming into the league. And it doesn't work in a year and a half, and we're like, nope, this guy stinks, get him out. Right? So, yeah, I to me, like, I want to see those guys soak up all of that eligibility.
Yeah, look what's happening at JJ McCarthy in Minnesota.
Right, exactly right.
Nuts. Yeah, we just have zero pay. We know, oh, he's a developmental project, but this isn't a developmental league. So yeah, I mean, Dante Moore's the classic guy who 4 years ago we would have been like, boy, sure wish he could have had another year of college to develop. Well, now he's actually doing that, and what could it mean for his game?
And again, he's got another if he wants it. You know what I mean? And so all these guys, like, Arch Manning could go back for another if he wanted to. So it'll be interesting to see that play out.
Sticking somewhat to the quarterback adjacent topic, Jeremiah Smith, the star wide receiver for Ohio State, to me is so good. Now, with the caveat of I look at the Broncos with orange and blue glasses, always from a Broncos lens. And thus I haven't dug as deep on the quarterbacks as I was, merely a couple of years ago. But to me, Jeremiah Smith is so stinking good, such a generational talent, that he's prospect one in this class. And he's prospect one where, like, obviously knock on wood, I hope this doesn't happen, but a report could come out in an hour that he busted his knee and is out for the rest of the season, and I don't think my opinion would change that much. Legal issues could happen, right, with the proper.
Sure, yeah, right.
I mean, if it's a quadruple homicide, maybe. Not to get too dark on you. Yeah. And he could pull off Jamar Chase and just shut it down. Yeah. Yep, Derek Stingley, shut it down. Again, my opinion would differ very little. He's that kind of generational type prospect. You have him as your prospect 2 and in your tier 2. So what's going into that eval? Where is our disconnect, though? I mean, again, we're kind of picking hairs. This is to entertain us in an August draft prospect.
Ultimately, my tier 1 is saved for starting quarterbacks, because starting quarterbacks are they're worth their weight in gold in terms of how they're paid in the NFL. When you look at and I'm like going off the top of my head here, I can pull it up real quick. I can look at what is Daniel Jones getting paid and compare that to Myles Garrett.
Absolutely.
Compare that to Jamar Chase or Patrick Surtain, right? Like the best players at every other position go to like middle of the rung at quarterback. So to me, if you are, and it goes back to, like I talked about the Darian Mensah grade and how I had Bo Nix graded. Like Bo Nix was so much higher on my board compared to anybody else, because how I do my board is reflective of how the NFL pays guys on the vet market. And by the way, this is something that if you get access to the draft guide, you go into each of those tiers in the big board, and you can click and say, like, all right, who are the pro players that fit into this tier, like how they're paid. So then you kind of get a sense of like, okay, Fran's got this wide receiver here in tier 2. Mm-hmm. Who are the receivers that are paid that way in the league? And you say, all right, that's where Jamar Chase is. That's where all Jackson Smith and Jigba, like that. That's where those guys are. All right, so that's the kind of player. Here's what I'll say about Jeremiah Smith. He has the highest grade, like in terms of like the film, like the prospect grade. It's the highest grade I've ever given to a player.
Really? Wow.
He's ridiculous. You're checking every box. Nuts. Can he get a little bit better as a route runner? Yeah, he can get a little bit better as a route runner. I don't love that at the end of every season he's had some soft tissue stuff pop up. It hasn't caused him to miss extensive time, but it's something that he's had to deal with at the end of every season. When you have a body that's built the way that he is, I do think that there are some things that like strength coaches and the medical teams with other teams might be like, all right, that's something that we'll have to monitor going into the league. That's it. A+ size, A+ speed, the hands, the ball skills, the toughness, the yards after catch, like all literally just check. He is a creative player in NCAA. He's a ridiculous talent. And so, he is a fantastic prospect.
Love that. This is, a little bit of helmet scouting, but does Marvin Harrison Jr. not living up to our expectations? Does that creep into your thinking with Jeremiah Smith, even in the slightest?
Not even, just because he is such a different physical specimen than what we saw with Marvin Harrison coming out, where it was like, he, for a guy that big, with Marvin Harrison, it was a lot of like, oh, like for a big guy, he moves well, right? Like you're kind of like saying that. With Jeremiah Smith, this guy, he moves well for a 5'10", 180-pound receiver, and he's doing it at 220. I know he was Bruce Feldman's number one freak in the freaks list, number two freak in the freaks list that came out this week, and some of the numbers that came out, it's like, for a guy that big to do that, just reflective of the kind of athlete that Jeremiah Smith is. Yeah,
he's, I mean, truly a freak. And then the production in that offense, the fact that, I mean, you were wide receiver 1 in an offense that had the 4th overall pick playing opposite wide out for you in the last draft. Like, how, like
he was the number, and he was the number 1 player, the number 1 target on the national championship team the year before. They went on that crazy run. He's, and all the intangibles, like I've got a bunch in the draft guide where it's just like quotes from coaches, like from going back to his freshman year, and you just kind of see like the way that this kid, he has been preparing for this moment since he was literally like 6-7 years old. There are some like crazy stories out there, like he will say, this is a good Jeremiah Smith nugget from the draft guide. The biggest moment of adversity he has ever faced was when he was cut from, he didn't make a team when he was 7 years old, and he went out and ran hills as like a 7-year-old. And I'm like, I feel like, well, one part of me, I'm like, it's a little strange. Just like a bit, because as a parent of as a dad of a 7-year-old, I'm like, I can't imagine my kid reacting that way. But also just kind of shows you like, that's what this kid, that's the mindset that this kid has had since he was a little kid.
Yeah, my little one is 8 and a different level of discipline, let's say.
Yeah, I think
running hills after not making a team. Yeah. What do you think is the strongest position in this class?
Still early for me to go too hard there, but I would say that I mean, there are 3 receivers in my top like 6 or 7 right now. When you look at Jeremiah Smith, Cam Coleman, and Charlie Becker. All 3 of them are underclassmen. We'll see if all 3 come out, all that. But to have those 3 as highly graded as I have them, that is exciting, because we haven't had that in a couple of years. I guess you go back to like the neighbors, the Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze. But honestly, like these 3 are better than those 3, right? Like I would say, like I would take Odunze, or I would take Jeremiah Smith over Marvin Harrison. I think I would take Cam Coleman and Neighbors is close, but I would take
very interesting comp.
Like I think that's Cam Coleman's awesome. He's going to bring such another dimension to that Texas passing game with Arch Manning. Putting him on the opposite side of Wingo. He reminds me of AJ Green. I know, honestly, like I don't throw lofty comps on guys. So when I do it, I save it for the ones that I feel that strongly about. I throw AJ Green on Cam Coleman. I've got Julio Jones on Jeremiah Smith. Nice. Those 2 guys are special talents.
Yeah. That's a fun one right there. Charlie Becker, I went out on a limb. I had Ryan Williams, and he's added a hyphen since his
Coleman.
breakout freshman season. Yeah, Ryan Williams, Coleman as my wide receiver 3. Where's he fall for you? Obviously, he's a tough eval, because that freshman year, particularly the Georgia tape, which maybe he's living off of still, was otherworldly, and then hasn't really kept up that momentum even in a sophomore year, where that Bama offense kind of found their groove again, but he wasn't as big a part of it.
Yeah, he had a major issue with like the drops last year, and so just seeing how he's able to bounce back from that. Obviously, he's adjusting to another new quarterback here in 2026, so we'll see who wins that competition. How Williams, is able to prevail off of that, but I think that like the mental side of it definitely started early. They started to kind of mount, and it kind of spiraled for him. So I think with Williams, that will be one of the big things, is seeing how he bounces back after that down year. I mean, he was the cover of EA of College Football 25 last year. So a guy that obviously everyone's very excited about, but I am excited to see what he looks like bouncing back off that year.
Feels like he could be Antonio Williams and be an early 3rd rounder, who again, he was part of that like stellar freshman wide receiver
Right.
class. Or yeah, he could work his way up into being a top 15 pick. You mentioned Cam Coleman. Is he the toughest eval for you this early in the season? Because he's tough. You watch a 2-minute highlight, by the final 30 seconds, you're watching him run routes and being overthrown, or the quarterback going to the other side of the field. It's like the offense he's come out of in Auburn is that bad. But now, of course, he gets to play with Arch at Texas, which really changes the whole conundrum.
Yeah, it's when you talk about like change in environment for Cam Coleman, going from that Auburn offense the last 2 years to where he's going now. Stark difference for what Cam Coleman's going to be able to see. Yeah. So, it is tough. Like let's say he was coming out of just that Auburn offense, like what we see is what we get kind of deal. I would still have this high of a grade on him, but it would worry me a little bit because it's like, all right, like, we got to see him in this environment. But I'm excited for Cam Coleman's future. He is a player that I'm really high on.
Are there any of these quote unquote blue chippers who you feel like they have the most bust potential coming into this year? Like the guys you're like, hey, I know I'm high on him now, but if by November they've dropped 30 spots on my board, that wouldn't surprise me in the slightest.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the highs are really exciting for Dylan Stewart, the pass rusher from South Carolina. There is a little bit of, for me, where it's kind of like with David Bailey last year, where I'm like, the run game stuff's not great.
Yeah.
But where I'm going to give him, I'm going to try and give him a little bit of grace, is that he was banged up the second half of last year and was dealing with what the head coach Shane Beamer described as like basically a broken back last year.
Jeez.
So like he fought through that in the second half of the season, wanted to continue playing, and was like, yeah, you're not taking me out. But he missed the entire spring, like couldn't really get going here this offseason, and now back on the field. But I think that's kind of like an underplayed storyline right now, is like the health of Dylan Stewart and what he looks like coming off that injury, because it was not something that required surgery, but it was like, all right, you got to rest this up. And that's why he ultimately was like, all right, I'm going to play through it then if you're telling me I don't need surgery. So I'm willing to give him some grace there, but it did not look great from like the effort, motor plays, and like overall run game stuff there with Stewart last year. So I would say that would be the one like boom bust potential type of swing from those high end blue chip grades.
I love that. We handicapped our top 10 where we gave a percentage of each guy in our top 10 of dropping to the Broncos.
Okay.
And he in my top 5 was the only guy who I had a higher than 10% probability of dropping to the Broncos, because he is that profile where it's like things could just explode and he's almost in that Jeremiah Smith tier.
Right.
Or if things don't go his way, we look back in 4 months and it starts to all be like, well, yeah, I mean, the reasons you like him, you start to talk yourself out of a lot more, though he has the intoxicating label. Like when things are working well for him, the way he overwhelms opposing offensive tackles with his length and speed is just intoxicating.
The highs are really impressive. His ability to turn the corner, the athleticism, the closing burst, and he was doing it as a true freshman. Like right out of the gate, you saw like, all right, like this guy's got the goods to be a top 10 type of pick. I compared him, and this is like my optimistic view of like, all right, what I think he could be, because I loved this player coming out of Florida State a few years back, Brian Burns. And the thing with Burns was like, he was like, pure speed, high side, but gave good effort in the run game. And it was like, all right, like there's enough there where I'm at least like checking the box and moving on. That's kind of how I want to feel about Stewart at the end of this year. Like I don't need him to be, a complete like edge setter and like dominate the point of attack. I doesn't need to be that, but as long as you can like check the box for me and I feel good about like the 1-2 and all that stuff. Yeah. Like we're moving on, and I feel good about that comp.
Yeah. He's something else. In the draft guide, you also have team fits, and I know you have a long list of like trends of how teams, and this is the stuff I really love talking to you about, how teams kind of their trends in drafting. So we've talked tight ends already. The Broncos will have, 5 of their 5 starting DBs. three in Jaquan McMillan, Riley Moss, and Brandon Jones are all in contract years.
Yep.
And we affectionately like to talk about how George Payton, the GM, is addicted to drafting DBs. We see you, George. We love you for it. But are there some guys who, as you were doing your summer study, you were like, oh, I'll have to bring this one up to the guys at DNVR. They're gonna, much like Justin Jolie. I think you were talking to us about Justin Jolie being a Broncos fit. Shoot, back in October, I want to say.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there are certainly some guys where it's like, yeah, like I can absolutely see that. There's this kid who I put him in my first round of my mock from Mississippi State, who really kind of caught my eye in the spring as I did like the too early mock draft. And I was like, all right, like if this guy goes, it's Kelly Jones, underclassman, where it's like, all right, there's a big corner with traits. I could see him being a fit for that kind of a system.
Yeah.
Just kind of looking here.
Kelly Jones, Fran, as you keep looking, he's one of those. He was just outside my top 10 because the tools are otherworldly. I mean, He's a corner that size with that kind of speed. He's still raw. He's one of those guys where, my approach with corners has always been I'd rather too handsy and we'll work our way to like scale that down.
Yep.
To like too passive and not aggressive enough. I feel like that's harder to teach than it is like, hey, let's pick our spots with when to be physical and when to be too handsy.
Sure.
He's still raw. Mississippi State's it's an uphill battle.
Yes.
That's one of those tougher P4 programs to have a good season, but the tools are really impressive. And I mean, yeah, he's kind of in that Bear Alexander tier where it's like, man, things start to work out. Like this guy's talent speaks for itself.
Yeah, I think they're, just in doing the corner class, there are a number of names that excite me. I would say another guy just to kind of like file away. I think that Zabian Brown from Alabama, if you like Jahdae Barron, right, then I think that Zabian Brown is coded in a lot of the same ways. He's not the same player. I actually like him a little bit more than I like Jahdae.
You certainly do.
But I like Zabian Brown. So if you liked him, I think you would like Brown. I think AJ Harris from Penn State or from Indiana, previously Penn State and originally Georgia. He's another one. I don't think he's like a first rounder, but I think when you get into like later day 2 into the early stages of day 3, that's kind of how I have him evaluated right now. He would be another one because I think that kind of in that Riley Moss tier when Moss was coming out of Iowa, where it's like, all right, like you're checking enough of the boxes here, and he looks like he could be like a solid starter, but maybe it's a high-end backup at worst. That's kind of how I viewed Moss, and Moss has hit more of that ceiling than what my floor was. I would put Harris in that same boat because when I watched him last summer, I felt better about the upside, and it was a little bit up and down this year. So I'm like, all right, like I feel like he's going to be somewhere in that range. So you're talking like 3rd, 4th round. And I think Harris could make some sense there.
So funny, the DBs, there's kind of the more toolsy guys, and then there's the guys who it's like, I just love their coverage profile. Like they just check off a lot of boxes. I can kind of hedge my bets on these guys because they're going to fit multiple schemes. They're going to fit multiple, like, there's a backup plan where they could play in the nickel. There's a backup plan where they could play safety. But then I don't know, the coverage profile, they check off a lot of boxes, guys. I feel like they don't always work out, or like the NFL doesn't value them as much as maybe I end up valuing some of these guys.
Yeah, that's what, I love watching corners. To me, what makes it so fun, it's one of my favorite positions to watch, and it's also one of my favorite positions to talk about because while I think we historically have called it a stopwatch position, and I think that's right when it comes to like draft stock, like all right, where guys get taken. But to me, like the longer I've done this, the longer I've watched like NFL tape and who are the corners that excel and who. To me, like competitiveness and ball skills and like route recognition and so you're talking like basically like instincts and ball, like the stuff that's not measured, I think I'm like weighing that more than like the pure height, weight, speed. And it's the guys that have a little bit of both, or that's what gets me really excited. But that's why, like, I was really high on Avion Terrell last year, even though he didn't like run well and he has shorter arms. I'm like, yeah, but the guy's like hyper competitive and the instincts are really good. And like, to me, there's a disconnect there in how we evaluate that position, but then also like what sticks and what plays. So it's a fun position to talk about because there's hits and misses on both sides of it.
No doubt. And I mean, in some ways, it makes me think about what you were talking about with quarterbacks, where you're going to give quarterbacks that bump. Because obviously, when a quarterback works out, it's just a higher threshold. But then how do you reach that threshold where it's like, well, this guy's just on the border of, is he a starter or is he a backup?
Right.
And obviously that changes a lot. There's a barrier of entry there where it's like, yeah, he might have a 10-year career, but is he ever going to be a $20 million plus average annual salary guy? That I don't know.
And it's easier to kind of ride the fence, and I'll lean optimistic this time of year versus all right when we got to like our pencils down in March and April. So that's why there are a handful of those quarterbacks you mentioned. Like I've got that cluster of like Sorsby and Chambliss and Sellers and Levitt, like a bunch of those guys where I'm like, yeah, like this guy's got starting trade. There's enough there where I could see starter, but as we get closer and get more intel and obviously everybody but Sorsby get more film, obviously, kind of paint the full picture, and that might determine, all right, does that guy go up or does that guy go down? Which side of the fence do we end up on?
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes it's pretty small things that you're like, oh man, I've seen these warning flags before. I'm just not putting my stamp of approval on this guy, or vice versa. I've seen this before, so I'm just gonna stick my neck out for him. Let's talk local prospects. You've got A Buff in your top 40. Tell us about him.
Yeah, and that's DeAndre Moore, who transfers in from the University of Texas. And I studied him last fall because, it's a chance like, all right, this guy could come out. He's an easy player to like. I don't know that because there was like some buzz like about him like top 50, top 75, back when I first studied him. I'm like, yeah, like I don't see that. But I do see a guy that's got some staying power in the NFL. I do think that for me right now, the way I view him is probably more of like a wide receiver 4 type of profile. He's not the biggest, he's not the fastest, but he's like fairly sweet. Almost you think like a, and this is going to sound funny because the guy I'm going to bring up was a first round pick this year, but like a poor man's Mekhi Lemon, where it's like, all right,
dude, 1,000%.
He's smaller. He's not the fastest.
Yeah.
He's not like a great like one-on-one route you up guy, but like there's enough there where he has a feel for settling the soft spots. He'll do some dirty work, but at that size, he's going to be limited. I do think that one of the differentiating factors between those two, like the reason why I can't throw Mekhi Lemon on him, is that Mekhi Lemon just catches everything. It was like outstanding ball skills. This kid is probably like a tier below that. Can fight the ball a little bit. That's one of the things I'd like to see kind of cleaned up here this year. But I do like the competitiveness. That's one of my favorite traits about his game. Obviously, he's entering an atmosphere here in Colorado where they lose Amarian Miller, and I think there's going to be some targets in that offense. So maybe you go to a situation where now you can kind of be the guy, because that's been one of the big knocks for him, is that he hasn't been a fixture in a passing game. They spread that ball around so much, and if you're not going to be that guy in college, it's tough to really buy in as a high pick for that in the NFL. And so, I like Moore. Don't love him, and I think that'll be the universal thought here when we get to 8 months from now.
Another differentiator with him and Lemon, and the Lemon early tape, the thing that really gave me some certainties on Lemon was when he took over for Zachariah Branch as a returner at USC. He was incredible.
Yeah, right.
And when you show that juice in the return game, that allows me to believe in your juice as a route runner and yak weapon as well. More, as you alluded to, probably not that tier of athleticism or explosiveness.
Yeah.
Is he a slot only guy to you?
I do think that he has some ability to be able to move to I do have him as a slot first player, but I think that there's enough there that he can be, he could be a Z and you kind of move him around. I do think he's one of those movement type players, though. You want to keep him on the move.
Is that a trend you're seeing as well, where like the slot wide receivers have just become more mainstream, and in some ways, especially the slot wide receivers who have that inside outside versatility, the Justin Jeffersons, the Puka Nakuas, Smith and Jigba is kind of a slot only, but boy, it sure has worked out for him. And I know I'm blanking at least one or two big names there, but that's a start.
Cooper Kupp, like when Cooper was
right. No, Cooper Kupp's exactly what I was thinking of.
But I think that is kind of, it points to the way that teams in the league play now, right? Where and a lot of it is the manifestation of so many of these Shanahan style offenses. But when you have all these condensed sets and you're bringing everybody close to the core of the formation, you're playing in traffic a little bit more. The fact that there's more motion now, Mekhi Lemon, if you just watched him last year against Leonard Moore, who the corner from Notre Dame, who all right, we're gonna play press man, and you gotta get off me. Couldn't do it. Like really struggled against Leonard Moore. That would be a death knell for a receiver 10 years ago. But right. In 2026, we're willing to look past that because of how much, when you look at how many teams are now like above 70%, 65% motion. He's going to be in motion all the time, and you're not going to be able to jam him as much as you would have been a decade ago. And so that ability to, can you beat press man coverage? That's a lot less of a talking point now than it was just a few years ago. And so, when you look at the JSNs of the world, that was a question you had about JSN. But to me, we talked about this with the cornerback position. When I'm looking at receivers now, like one of the things I have started to put a lot of value in is like your ability to play through contact in every phase of the route. Like, all right, because if you're going to be working close to the core of the formation, that means that you're going to be dealing with more traffic, more bodies. Can you deal with congestion? Do you have that ability to kind of fight through, not necessarily fight through a jam, but 4 yards down the field, if you're going to get bumped by the linebacker and you got a safety, you got a nickel, you obviously have the corners. Like, do you have that ability to fight through contact mid route, win at the catch point in traffic, and then like after the catch, like do you have that ability to operate in traffic? And that's not like, we're not measuring that in the 40-yard dash and in the 3-cone drill and things like that. But I think that is an important prerequisite in today's game, and it's evident when you look at some of the body types. Now, the guys like Jamar Chase, they're all, the Jeremiah Smiths, those guys are always going to, they're always going to have that lofty grade. But I think we have become more accepting of like the movement type receivers, as long as they're able to check some of those other boxes that we just talked about.
For sure. And honestly, reconnecting it to a Broncos topic, that competitiveness at every level of the route and stem, it's the one knock I had on Jerry Jeudy. And I think it kind of proved out to some extent, was like, he left me wanting a little more at the top of the route competing and at the end of the route. And some of it was just raw tools. When you don't have that elite size or you don't have that elite physicality, it's going to show up. And I think that was one of Jerry's problems. Now, is it crazy that in an era where college football is giving us more wide receivers to choose from than it ever has? I mean, that position is straight loaded, that we're willing to give a pass to guys that we wouldn't have in the past, when it's like, well, there's just such an abundance. Why would we take a guy who we would have knocked 10 years ago when there's just like 20 more to pick from in the second and third round?
Well, it's, to me, not to not answer the question, but it's also I think it's part and parcel with this. When I look at some of the contracts that are being handed out to, solid receivers, we talked about this with quarterback, but I think it's the same thing at receiver. Like Jacoby Myers gets traded from the Raiders to the Jaguars at the deadline last year, and the Jaguars give him that extension. He's getting $20 million a year. And we're like, all right, like that's kind of like middle of the road. Like I don't know exactly where that ranks in receiver money, but it's like, all right, that's like just outside the top 20 in terms of like, quote unquote, like number, like legit money.
Yeah.
That's just under what the Falcons just gave Bijan Robinson. You know what I mean? Like, when you're talking about like impact of like player, okay? So
there's borderline franchise left tackles who are making that kind of money.
Yeah, and so when I look at receivers coming out And there, we had these kind of, I just had a lot of this conversation in Philly when they picked Mekhi Lemon. I'm like, yeah, like I don't know that Mekhi Lemon's ever going to be like a number one receiver. And everyone's like, oh, well, if that's good, like why are you taking him in the top 20? And it's like, because that's where those guys get valued at now. Like Jacoby, no one's looking at Jacoby Myers like, yeah, sign me up. That guy's my number one receiver. But he's getting paid as much money as Bijan Robinson, right? Like so, to me, like the starting receivers in the NFL. That's kind of par for the course. And now it's the like what's the replacement value on getting this guy on a rookie contract and getting him for 5+ years. That becomes part of the equation for smart general managers.
Yeah, in a sense, the standard's been raised so high to where now your number 4 wide receiver needs to be at the level of a number 3 15 years ago.
Right. But now, like, is that going to bounce back with all the tight end stuff? And so it's very interesting just to see how this all plays out, in the, and because the raw numbers are going to keep rising, right? Just because the cap keeps going up and up and up and up and up. So like people are going to get caught up with, like this guy's getting 20 now, this guy's getting 25. Well, you kind of have to look at like, what percentage of the cap is this? How is this reflective compared to other positions? Because as these running backs have gotten paid over the last couple of weeks, everyone's like, oh, look, running backs are getting paid now. And it's like, well, not really, because you compare that to what some of the other contracts that are being handed out at other positions, it's still basically in the same spot.
For sure. And I kind of think wide receivers maybe overtaken offensive tackle as like the second most valuable position in an offense, right? And it's because of some of the things you're talking about. Like there are ways to cover up and masquerade and like feed those guys, and you're less reliant on just having a beast in the trenches who's winning one-on-one. Though obviously that's still very valuable.
All right, so I'm going to take Brandon Ayuk. I'm going to take him out of there. But no, I'm going to keep Brandon Ayuk in there because the contract. Because the contract was a couple years ago, so it's actually like you're not even taking inflation into account. There are 13 wide receivers that are making north of $30 million a year right now. Actually, remove Puka, so 12. There are 12 receivers because Puka hasn't gotten paid yet. We know he's going to, so he'll be in that range in the coming months. How many offensive tackles do you think are in that range?
I'd guess the same amount. 12, 13 were there.
One. Laramie Tunsil.
Wow.
That's it.
And I don't know that he's worth that money.
Well, and so like, Penny Sewell's not there. Tristan Wirfs isn't there. Lane Johnson's not there. There are 4 corners in that realm. Jeez. And PS2 is not in that group. PS2 is like, because he got paid first or was one of the first paid. McDuffie's there. Denzel Ward is there now. Stingley's there. And Sauce Gardner's there. There are 3 defensive tackles there. There are 1, 2, 3. There's 6, 8. There's 9 edge rushers there. Right? There's 1 tackle. So like that's crazy. It is very interesting how the things have kind of evolved here over the course of the last several years. Because it used to be, like tackle, that's the spot. Now there are a bunch in that tier below, but tackle's kind of hit a ceiling here in terms of how these guys are all getting paid.
Well, we don't need to tell Eagles fans or Broncos fans the importance of being able to win in the trenches, right? I think that's been such a key to both teams' success in the last, couple seasons, longer window of success for the Eagles than it's been for the Broncos. But it's funny that that's still how things are skewing. We've got 2 minutes, Fran. Give me your hottest draft take going into the 2026 college football season for this 2027 NFL draft.
Hottest draft take.
I got to look at your rankings. I got to find one.
Yeah, that's what I'm like looking. I'm like, oh, is that a hot take? Like, I know some people think John Mateer is like a high-end prospect. I've never really seen that, whether it was Washington State or last year at Oklahoma. Even like seeing him live. I saw him live last year, and it's.
That Michigan tape was impressive, but
it's like he plays well, but I can't quite get there. I know there's a lot of love for Kewan Lacey, and I'm not saying he's not a good player, but I've done a handful of these running backs. And I don't have any of them as like, I would take this guy definitely in the top 50. Mm-hmm. I'm not quite there on anyone. Now that might change this year, but I haven't quite gotten there yet with any of these guys. I wouldn't call any of these hot takes, but I would say I'm higher than most on Darian Mensah right now. I'm probably higher than most on Charlie Becker right now, the receiver from Indiana.
Yep.
So yeah, those would probably be the ones where I'm planting a flag right now in mid-August.
And Johnson. What is it? Jamari. I almost called
Jamari Johnson. Yeah. Jamari Johnson. I'm high on him as well.
It's not a bad tier of Mensa, Becker, Johnson to be higher on the most.
Yeah.
I like that. And Will Uckles, the Ole Miss offensive tackle, or defensive tackle, who I think I actually need to go back and watch more. This was an absolute blast. Thank you so much, Fran. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Tiff, on the 1s and 2s. Again, the good folks on the Broncos pod will have you covered across the board Friday, pregame, watch along, postgame. Benny, Hank, RG's joining the fun. Gonna have some other people in on that, so tune in. And we'll be back next week with more draft talk. Until then, God bless Bo Nix. We out.
We all silly like the mayor.